You're now listening to the Shift Training Show, where we're focused on improving the quality of human interaction. Today we have Joe LaRussa back, and today we're going to be focusing on early stage relationships, learning how to lead with your partner. We're going to talk about unspoken expectations a little bit, unclear roles, and avoided conversations, and how that influences relationships, especially in the beginning. You want to have a good foundation so you can have a good follow through in the rest of the relationship. Joe, welcome back. How are you today?
Very well, Flip. Thanks for having me back and looking forward to the conversation.
I can't wait. So the first thing that I want to present to you is why attraction and maybe alignment are not the same thing. Early in the game, there's a lot of attraction. We're not sure about alignment yet. Could you talk to me a little bit about that and how that might play a role in the beginning?
Sure. And as I've said in other conversations that we've had, leadership at work and leadership at home look very similar. So it's very similar in the workplace, right? You get that new job, you're super excited. Your new boss is probably really excited to have somebody that they handpicked to come on board. And so it's very similar to this kind of relationship dealings in your personal sphere as well. So attraction and kind of that magnetism that naturally occurs, right? That's a little bit different than having alignment and learning about each other's leadership styles. We talk a lot about chemistry and having good alignment in the C-suite, right? The C-level, the chief this officer, the chief that officer, they all have to be kind of on the same page in order to drive the organization in a positive direction. So it's similar in the household. When you and a new partner are getting together at first, it's all about the magnetism and the attraction. But for the long term, it's even more important that you're aligned on values and what matters most.
Awesome. Absolutely. I could see that. That is going to be necessary for sustainability and growth together in a relationship, and of course in business as well. So I guess my next question is going to be, when in a relationship, let's say we have this attraction, right? We're trying to figure out about the alignment or find that out. There's times for leadership that might start to appear early, and then versus like going with the flow. How can you tell or discern when is it a good time to start trying to work on the leadership components versus let's go with the flow and enjoy this time?
I think that it comes down to understanding each other's strengths that they bring to the relationship. Just like in the workplace, each team member has something special that they bring to the team or that they bring to the organization. And it's very similar in these personal relationships. And when you're dealing with your household, it's figuring out who is, more of the visionary. So in my own household, right, my wife is very visionary. She sees the future better than me. She's very creative. And I'm kind of more operations, right? Making sure things are happening when they need to, making sure resources are available, being resourceful and finding resources when we need them, whether that's time or money or stuff. So it's really important in the leadership side to identify strengths and identify gaps where the two of you can work together to close those, because it could be neither of you has what you need to close a particular gap in your household. So it's important to identify that as well. Going with the flow, this is more about situational leadership and realizing that not all battles have to be won. Figuring out which ones are really worth, tackling and wrestling with. And in some cases, good leaders are able to discern, by taking a look at the situation and saying, does everybody win if we wrestle with this topic? If this is about me winning or you winning, maybe it's not something we need to really spend energy on. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say also not just in terms of battle, but maybe there are times where something needs to happen that might be time sensitive. And maybe this is a time where actually we're supposed to be taking time and just being present with each other, right? So I think of cases like that as well. Yeah.
Yeah, it's absolutely true. It's absolutely true that the time, spending time and spending energy on those things is super important for sure.
Awesome. Yeah, I wonder, before I go to my next question, that makes me wonder because we have a lot of younger men in our audience, and I was wondering, as a man, you are taught or told that, a great deal of the leadership sits with you. Like you're supposed to be responsible for a good portion of that. early in the relationship, do you feel like that is maybe more important or maybe a little less important than once maybe later down the road? How, that's a question I think some young men might appreciate understanding.
Yeah, and it makes sense because it's something that it weighs on the minds of men everywhere about when is the right time to activate that leadership component, and when are you really trying to make more of a decision about your future with this person, with this other person that you're going to build your life with. So I think at the beginning, it's more about assessing fit, like that interview process at work, right? We're trying to figure out, is there a fit here? Is there good chemistry here? Can I see myself having a hard discussion with this person and us being able to come to a resolution that maybe neither of us is satisfied with, but it takes care of whatever the circumstance is. Like assessing that fit, I think, is more of what's happening initially. And then as the relationship deepens and the trust deepens, you can kind of unpack these more complicated aspects and figure out when to activate that leadership, especially, like I said, if you identify strengths and gaps, right, you can kind of figure out when to activate your leadership and when to activate your partner's leadership based on who's the strongest to lead in that moment.
Okay, so that's a good one. How do you activate your partner's leadership? How can you create space to summon that or bring that forth? I think this is an interesting one. As a male, how might you encourage or support your partner to lead at some times, but also at the same time, maybe there are some ladies in the audience who want to know, well, how can I encourage or support my man being a leader?
Yeah. The biggest thing that can be done in both directions is in the communication moments where you have that opportunity to affirm, to encourage, to be a cheerleader for your partner. There are lots of times where, and you'll hear it, and whether it's at work or at home, it sounds similar, right? You hear the uncertainty in the voice, or you feel like there's a request for not permission, but affirmation, like there's this pull for it. So you have those moments where you can absolutely activate their leadership by saying, this is 100% what we should do. What do we need to do to make it happen? How can I help make this a reality, whatever this is? And listening, really listening for those moments where that affirmation or that encouragement can come in. And it's the same thing at work, right? When my engineers would come to me, not really sure, I would tell them, why are you coming to me? This is absolutely fine. Go for it. What do you need? When do you need it? How can I help? And they're kind of like, they puff up a little bit, right? They walk out of that discussion really feeling like, all right, I got this, right? So those are the moments where you can really activate your partner's leadership is noticing when they are using their leadership or attempting to bring it forward, and you have that opportunity to be the encourager, the effort, the affirmation, the cheerleader.
Awesome. I think I just want to highlight this really quickly because something that you said that I think takes a lot of practice is listening well enough to know that maybe they are looking for that affirmation or support or encouragement, and that's what you should be doing at that time. Just understanding, just catching that little bit of nuance in the way they may present the question, right? Or, yeah, I think that's great. I think that's very helpful. Thank you, Joe, for that.
My pleasure. No, I would just add too, there's an element of respect that you also want to be aware of, right? If you're, and we'll get it, I know we'll probably get more into this in another part of the discussion, but there is a point where you have to recognize that the two of you are making the decision together, and out of respect, you need to bring the decision forward, even though it might be your area of expertise or your area of strength or your zone of influence. It's still important that you bring your partner with you in the decision-making process, even if it is, just from a respect standpoint, and then again, because that respect was shown to you, you have the opportunity to bring that affirmation and that encouragement in that moment.
That's awesome. Yeah. When I think about respect and bringing something to your partner to lead together, I think of that as getting their buy-in, Like you want their buy-in so you guys can be aligned and be in agreement about what's about to happen. Does that sound about right?
100%. Yep, that's absolutely right.
Awesome. Okay, great. So my next question for you is around clarifying values, roles, and expectations before stress tests arrive. So this might be kind of a interesting question to ask. I think it's going to vary, but I'm curious to hear your answer. At what point in a relationship, you're dating or you guys are maybe already talking about starting to move in, when should we start having discussions around clarifying shared values, roles, and expectations with one another?
The seriousness of the relationship plays into this here, right? If this is a casual thing and that's what it is, there's no reason to create weight or heaviness, right?
Right.
If it's a casual thing. And I know that in some seasons, right, it is casual for some people, right? All of us have those seasons where it's I just want to have a good time. I want to hang out with people. I want to be around people. That's fine. But at the moment where you feel, or you and your partner feel like this is getting more serious, or I want this to be more serious, then I think that's when you start to broach this topic of, roles and responsibilities, or expectations is probably the better way to put it, right? Because if you feel like it's getting more serious and your partner feels like it's getting more serious, okay, now we need to have an alignment conversation about our expectations for where we're going together, because we're no longer just coming alongside one another, doing life side by side. We are talking about doing life together, and that now requires an expectations conversation.
Okay, so definitely not right away. Definitely not right away, but the moment it starts to become something a little bit more serious, where you guys want to approach more of your life together, you want to have more things shared, more moving along the journey together, something like that.
That, and I think the common point of reference I'll use is the point at which you want to be exclusive with this person, right? This is a common area of confusion, especially maybe sometimes for the guys more than the ladies, right? Where it's kind of like, well, I didn't know we were exclusive. What do you mean? I just was seeing my friend, or my girlfriend or my significant other might feel some kind of way about me still seeing exes or still seeing other women, or the way that I interact with other women when we're out socially, right? Now that's a common point where it's very easy to start talking about expectations, where one or the other is feeling like it's time to move into exclusivity, right? I want to do life with you, and that means you need to now make a decision about whether that's what you want, because I need to know where you're at. So I think that that's a very common point of reference for a lot of couples, about that first point in the relationship where exclusivity becomes the theme. That's a great point to start the expectation conversation.
Okay, fantastic. That is great. Thank you, Joe, so much for that one as well. Oh, man, that's good stuff. Okay, so our next one we're going to talk about communication as like a proactive leadership skill and not just a repair tool. Something I've heard a lot about. I have female friends and family members, and I like having conversations with them about relationships because it gives me insight that I don't have because I'm a guy, right? So and sometimes I think it is commonly expected that they won't share how they feel. Guys won't share how they feel or what's going on with them. And neither side wants to talk until it becomes a problem. So I want to talk about how we can use communication just proactively, how we can practice it, how can we include that in our leadership practice and not just wait until there's fires to put out.
For sure. And this goes hand in hand with that previous point we were making about roles, expectations, and clarification about values. My wife is a master at this. Okay. She's very good at communicating proactively, and that is one of her superpowers is bringing up something that maybe is simmering but hasn't quite come to a rolling boil, right? But we need to get on top of it together. So that is where I think it goes hand in hand with this expectation. And typically the 3 points of pressure that you feel in a relationship are around time or social pressure. And those pressure points are what typically will bubble up as a need for communication. How are you spending your time, right? If you're spending your time apart, and that is something that the two of you are understanding and agreeing to, and as opposed to spending the time together, right? How money is spent. This is a huge topic for couples. And then social, right? Keeping score about whose friends we're hanging out with more, or when we're seeing people, right? Who's the priority for this holiday, right? I mean, those are all things that create, friction or pressure. And those are key points where communicating proactively and saying, the holidays are coming up. I just want to make sure, it's important to me that we see the people that are important to you. And I know it's important to you that we see the people that are important to me. So let's communicate and talk about it now before December 23rd about where we're going to spend Christmas Eve, for example. Not that that's ever come up, but it's an easy one, right? It's you're coming together and you're blending two worlds that you've been living in separately, and now you want to combine them. It's important. Those are easy points of communication and clarification to say, these people are important to you, so they're important to me. These people are important to me, so I know they're important to you. Let's work together and communicate proactively about how we're going to make sure we see all of the people who are important to us.
Yes.
At these important times of year.
Absolutely. That's awesome. Yeah, I feel like maybe for things that are higher, like heavier items like that, people are more willing to communicate or be proactive. But what do you think about for some of the smaller things? I know we want to pick and choose, quote unquote, what would be battles, but also, again, not everything is a battle. Sometimes we may not communicate around a need. So we talked about having those discussions around expectations, right? What if somebody is used to, let's say one partner is used to not relaying their expectations and the other partner maybe is? How can we encourage or support the other partner to communicate or share some of their expectations so sooner before there becomes maybe resentment or a fire? What is something we can do to encourage them?
Yep, and this goes right back to the top of the conversation where we talked about attraction versus alignment, right? That alignment, you can watch and observe, and then you have to make a decision. If there's just a lack of alignment about what communication looks like and about what we communicate about, that's an assessment that you have to make, and for yourself. And how much time, energy are you willing to invest to explore whether it can improve to a point that you can be satisfied with it, right? So that's still an individual decision that you would make. And especially when you've got people coming from two different worlds, right? And that was very much, my story. Like I said, my wife's superpower is communicating proactively in this way. That was not my way. A first generation immigrant household, Italian, stoic Italian dad, not really a feelings kind of guy, just wants to go and grind on whatever the task is of the day. My mom, very passionate, feeling person, deeply feeling person. And, their styles were very different, but they found a way. But I wouldn't say that they were, models of the kind of communication that you and I are talking about right now. So it's really that individual assessment first.
Okay.
And then deciding that you're going to make the investment to bring the communication to the level that it needs to be.
Okay. But Joe, at work, I'm an amazing leader, and I've got all my team members. They know how to better communicate now. I can teach this person. I can help them. Not a good approach.
Yes. No. I mean, we do that all the time, right? There are scores of human resource case studies where, people got through the process, and then we find out when they start working that they're not a fit.
Right.
So, and this is the term that gets used, to say they're qualified, they have the skills, they have the knowledge, they have the ability, But all of the assessment tools that are being used to vet this team member are quantitative, not necessarily very qualitative, and you
Right.
lose the fit assessment in the mix of all of that. And so it is at home. You know, at work, you can work on it, but sometimes you make a decision that, you know, this is just not a fit. And in your personal sphere, it's the same. You know, you get down the road a little bit, and the conclusion is it's not a fit. And it's not that you're a bad person. It's not that they're a bad person. It's not anything to do with that. It's just not a fit. That's it. It's
Just not a
very,
fit.
that's all it is.
Understandable. Totally understand. Thank you, Joe. What are my last question that I have for you today is what are some practical mindset shifts that couples can adopt like almost immediately? If you were to give them, here's a few that you recommend. What's a mindset shift or two or three that you think couples early in their relationship they should probably try to adopt immediately?
I would say treat the relationship and the communication as a isolated channel. Avoid projecting the way you communicate with other people that you already have relationships with. Avoid projecting those patterns onto this new one because you want it to develop on its own, and you want to avoid the risk of, like, I know from work that I can't communicate with my introverted people like I would communicate with my extroverted people. And I can't communicate with my, you know, folks that are very fact and figure oriented the same way that I would talk to or communicate with people who run on feelings or run on, you know, your intuition, right? So just like I have to be situational in my communication at work, it's very similar with a mind shift with couples is avoid projecting what you think you know onto this new communication pathway that you are building with this other person, because you want to evaluate it on its own merits. And then if you see elements from your other relationships that can help you in communication with this new person, then you can get the benefit. And you can avoid deploying something too early that is going to be detrimental to the relationship you're trying to build.
I think that's really good. One thing you said there that really stands out for me as a keyword is if it's helpful. I think sometimes if the situation is tough, it's easy for us to respond from a place of fear. And that makes it difficult for us to choose responses that are helpful. I think that highlighting that within that phrase is essential to being able to navigate discussions or situations, especially, you know, specific situations, in a way that can be fruitful. I feel like that has to be the focus.
100%. And that also reminds me as well that when you're experiencing frustration or moment of anger from another person, you have to understand that's a secondary response. And that's a mind shift that a lot of people, you know, miss, that it's a consequence of some other emotional trigger, whether it's fear, like you said, or, you know, in danger, you know, you're feeling like you're kind of getting put upon a little bit, right? It's that fight, flight, freeze moment. And then the anger and the frustration are the consequence. That is you shifting your mind to recognize, okay, this is a secondary thing. There's something else behind this. I need to get to that. And that's where the communication skills and the listening skills come in very handy, so that you can dig behind that surface level frustration or anger response and dig behind that and find out what's really underneath there.
Excellent. Yeah, I think one, being able to find out what's really going on can be tough. I feel like as both partners get better at their leadership skills and improve on their communication, I think that sometimes things can remain tough but become simple. But in the beginning, it seems very daunting. It can be a lot. And I think that's when, you know, you definitely want to get some support and help wherever you can. And with that in mind, actually, that was our last question. So, Joe, for couples that want to work better together and be able to lead their relationship together, how can they get in touch with you? What's the best way for them to connect with you? You're a knowledgeable guy. You know the things. I would love to connect our audience with you.
Well, I would say I've trod a lot of ground in my time, and anything I can do to pay it forward is a privilege. So definitely, if your audience or anybody out there is struggling with these topics or trying to figure out how to translate workplace leadership skills to your personal sphere, or your home, your household, go to homegrownleadership.net. One of the things you can do on the website is book a call with me, and help yourself create that opportunity to exert better leadership at home and better leadership with those around you. And booking that call is the first step to your leadership transformation journey. And I'm here to help and serve in any way that I can.
Excellent. All right. We will make sure that link is in the description and the show notes. So if you need any support, you can reach out to Joe LaRussa at homegrownleadership.net, and we'll take care of everything from there. He's got you. Book a call. Joe, closing thought for
Thanks,
today.
Flip.
If you were to make one recommendation, let's say it's a newer couple, they are serious, they've decided we want to start having discussions about maybe what does, later the rest of this year look like. Maybe, maybe they've been together for a few months, and, maybe in the back of their mind, maybe like thinking about getting engaged and things like that. What would be a thought or something you'd like to leave them with for the week?
The thought I would leave everyone with is, the further into the future you are thinking about your life with this person, then I think that's the signal that some of these things we've talked about probably need to be explored or implemented, right? If you are starting to see your future with another person, that's a pretty clear indicator that everything else is going to work out, and the tools that you have in your toolbox, wherever they come from, are going to be well utilized because you've got a good partner. So just as you see the future, do you see that future with somebody? Double down and go for it.
All right, let's go, everybody. Okay, well, Joe, thank you again for your time. I look forward to our next discussion.
Me too, Flip. Thanks again for the time.
All right, everybody, take care.